I agree.
Sacks, what do you think about Vivek's unpopular statement? And I'd like to hear whether it's unpopular with the base, but it was certainly unpopular in the room last night, that the climate change agenda is a hoax, which drew a lot of boos.
That was weird.
Is that a lightning bolt kind of thing to say? Why would he say that? And what's the strategy there?
It's like Trump saying he loves coal. And he loves coal miners. It's just pandering.
It felt to me a little bit like he was trying to say the agenda is a hoax, meaning like all the ESG stuff is nonsense.
Exactly.
But it comes across as him saying climate change isn't real and he's got to now deal with the repercussions of saying that.
He believes in climate change. It's strategic.
I think it's... But I don't think you know what he believes, J. Cal. But
yeah, his follow-up comment around that was he said that it is an economic yoke on our country because the combination of subsidies and the lack of expansion of carbon is what's holding back the country economically. So that's how I think I remember him tying these two things together. So that's probably where the statement.
No intelligent person doesn't believe that the planet's not heating up. Come on. And that it's not better to go to renewables. That's just...
How do you know? Have you looked at the science, J. Cal?
Of course I have. Yes, it's massive
you've
consensus.
Gone deep on the science?
As deep as a person needs to go. Friedberg, we're not going to have this debate now.
You just treat it... Look, it's just something you're supposed to believe in.
No, I'm not.
I'm not saying that
I'm just looking at the statistics of how the planet has gotten warmer. That's it.
I will say Sacks is right. That it has become a thing that it's like we're all supposed to take as given. No one is going to go up and say, here's the science that validates, here's the data that validates, there's some empirical evidence, and then people use counter-empirical evidence to try and counter it. And that's what makes it a little bit of a movement now, which is the institutions, the elites, however they're framed, have been wrong so many times on the things that they told us were given, that we're supposed to assume that this is a given too. F that. I'm not going to be told what to believe anymore. And I don't want to be told what to believe anymore is exactly what people
Let me state my position.
That's what they
clearly.
heard from that song last week, and that's what they heard, in Vivek's
Let me state
statement.
my position clearly.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Ditto.
After COVID...
Without me even making a comment on climate change.
100%.
We were told so much bullshit that was in the name of science during COVID.
Yeah.
They told us the vaccines were safe and effective.
I just want to clarify my position before you respond to it. It's undeniable that temperatures have risen. I think it's a crazy experiment to run to not try to lower it. It's just a crazy experiment. The planet is precious. I don't think we should run it. I am not dogmatic about it. It's not a religious thing. I'm not genuflecting. It's not
an experiment we're running, Jake. It's called human development and growth. And
yes, and the temperature has gone up, and the temperature goes up. So why wouldn't we use renewables and nuclear and not pollute? Because not polluting is good too.
When you have self-proclaimed scientific experts and or 16-year-old girls shaming everybody with pretty flimsy data, there was a while where everybody just said, they must be right. And COVID exposed the hoax. And so now we're a lot less prone to believe these self-proclaimed intellectuals and their jargon and their nonsense. So ask me, how much money have I invested in climate change with all that data? 0. Ask me how much money I've invested in technologies that will benefit climate change as a byproduct of national security. Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
And the reason I give you that example is that for me, that framing was just such a turnoff because I couldn't buy into it.
Yeah, there are multiple reasons.
But then the more pragmatic, realistic framing, which allowed us to actually say, maybe you're right, but maybe you're wrong, but let's not even debate the issue. Let's just go and make sure we're not dependent on another country and fighting endless wars. That got me off my ass to do stuff. And I think there's a lot of people in America that are in that second category. They don't want emotionally riddled dogma to drive their life and how they're forced to make decisions.
You can come up with 3 or 4 really good reasons to not keep burning fossil fuels. They're dirty, they're pollutants. There are better options that are more sustainable, that are more cost effective. It's more cost effective to put solar in than to burn coal or build a new coal plant. So there's economic reasons. And then there's, of course, hold on, let me finish.
Those points.
Yeah, what we're saying
is we're not automatically going to trust.
I am not automatically trusting. I'm taking the body of evidence. I'm not blindly trusting anybody. I'm taking the body of evidence and saying that entire body of evidence, geopolitical. I don't believe you've
really looked at the evidence. I don't believe you've gone deep on this issue.
Okay, anyway.
I haven't gone deep on this issue. That's all I'm saying. I'm not in a position to agree or disagree with you.
If you listen to what I'm saying, if you listen as opposed to telling me what I think, and you listen to what I'm telling you, There are many reasons to pursue sustainable energy, clean energy, and geopolitics is one of them. And, polluting the environment is one of them. And temperatures rising, if that indeed results in damages to the oceans and weather patterns. There are 5 or 6 great reasons to stop burning coal and stop burning oil.
Look at these 2 climate whitewashers we're living in this moment. People were so convinced they just needed to roil the country around the hurricane hitting California. And by the time it landed, it was a storm. There was rain in Los Angeles. I asked people here when I got here, I said, how is this a hurricane? They're like, it wasn't a hurricane. And in fact, the news were so tilted about it, they had to call it could have been a hurricane.
Yeah,
but
they
it
get
was
ratings.
just a storm.
Ratings.
Second is this thing in Maui, it turns out Michael Schellenberger has done some pretty good work on this, is exposing that a lot of the reason these fires may have started was because of this radical climate agenda that caused the utility to not invest in the protective measures they should have around power lines. That is crazy, Jason.
Oh, yeah. I'm not defending what happened in Maui. It's obviously incompetence. We should be bearing... We have the same issue in California, which is
wind.
Is
dogmatic belief. There's a consequence.
I'm not a dogmatic believer.
No, I'm not saying you are.
I'm a pragmatist.
I'm just trying to make... Yeah. I'm not saying you are. I'm trying to make this point. When people dogmatically believe bodies of evidence that they themselves don't interrogate fully, it may lead them to conclusions and then actions that you are now seeing have measurable human consequences. If you look at PG&E in California, it's riddled with these issues.
Yeah, they shut our power off because they're afraid that wind is going to blow down power lines and start fires. Yeah, and we just need to bury them.
So I think that it would be great to not debate the climate issue, put a pin in it, and instead just say, we all want our kids to be able to have clean air around us.
Yes.
We want clean water to drink. And we want to make sure that we have the resources to be productive as human beings without having to send our kids to war or without putting the country in danger.
100%, which is exactly my point. There are so many reasons to take this seriously and move to renewables and nuclear. All right, listen, this has been an insanely great episode. Hey, let me just get one person's comments. So here's your red meat for Sacks here. It sounds like there was the coup 60 days later. The guy who was running the coup in Russia had a little accident. It's so random. Maybe your thoughts, Sacks.
You're talking about Prigozhin?
Yeah, he had some mechanical difficulties on his PJ. I don't know what happened. Is he not sending that citation in for maintenance? What happened? They had a bad engine or something? It's so random. Poor guy.
The latest reporting from the New York Times this morning is that Prigozhin's plane was not shot down, but rather they believe there was an explosive device on it.
Oh, okay.
So we don't know. We don't know exactly who planted it.
I figured it was a bird strike, something random, like a bird strike.
No,
yeah. Not a
somebody
bird
took him out. Somebody took him off the board.
Really? Oh, must have been.
Listen,
it must have been Ukraine, right? That's who you were putting it on. It's Ukraine.
No, I think it's probably pretty obvious who did it, although we won't know for sure.
Say the name. Say the name.
Listen, I think that
it was Putin.
Allegedly. Allegedly. That's what you always say whenever Hunter Biden's accused of doing something. You always have to insert allegedly.
There was a little cocaine and maybe some bribes.
I think this resolves the question of who came out on top during that mutiny. There were a lot of people speculating that somehow Prigozhin had the upper hand or he was paid off or
that
what
it was
have
not
you.
a coup, right? Remember there was a line of thinking, this wasn't a coup. If it wasn't a coup, then why did Putin whack him?
Whack, whack.
And it was exactly 60 days later. Is that correct? That was the other thing. Is that?
Can I ask a question? How funny is it that it's like Putin's like, hey, Prigozhin, come and see me. We're good. Nothing to worry about.
I'll send a private jet.
And then, And then it's like, listen, where are you going to the Black Sea? You can take my PJ. And he's like, great, see you later. How does this happen? You can't even write this stuff.
In related news, Friedberg is sending his PJ to take me down to the Elon Summit. Oh, thanks for the ride, Friedberg.
I told you, it's like Michael Corleone.
It's unbelievable.
Apparently there was a meeting about a month ago. I remember it being reported where Prigozhin and the other heads of Wagner came to meet with Putin. And the deal that Putin supposedly offered was that Wagner could stay together, but they had to report to the Russian military. And the Wagner commanders were on board with it, but one person objected, and that was Prigozhin.
Oh.
So it's a little bit like, remember the meeting between Michael Corleone and Mo Green in Vegas?
Mo Green, yeah, exactly.
Where, Michael's like, think of a price, and Mo Green's like, you don't buy me out, I buy you out.
Exactly.
He had that kind of reaction.
Yep.
And the guy had some sort of death wish, I guess.
You know what they say? Beware the dog that doesn't bark. Putin said nothing for the last 2 months. He was like, yeah, it's all good. Nothing out of the Putin camp. And then boom. Putin is a murderous lunatic who must be stopped and contained.
Well, I think this is the opposite of being a lunatic. I think this is somebody who is very cold and calculating.
Okay, yeah. Murderous, calculated sociopath.
He figured out how to diffuse a mutiny. I don't think it was a full-on coup, but a mutiny that would have been very disruptive to his front line if he had basically tried to violently suppress it. So he cuts a deal where basically he offers banishment to Belarus. Prigozhin was supposed to go to Belarus. By the way, we don't know exactly why Prigozhin returned to Moscow or St. Petersburg. He was supposed to be staying in Belarus or Africa. So maybe he violated the terms of his probation. We don't know. There were all these people on social media who were pinning their hopes for regime change and liberal reform within Russia on Prigozhin, which was always absurd because he was this warlord whose behavior and conduct was even more erratic and violent than Putin. So he was never going to be a great vessel for liberal reform in Russia. Nonetheless, there were all these people who pinned their hopes for regime change in Russia on Prigozhin. We can see now what a stupid idea that was. The Russian regime, whether you like it or not, is stable. It is not unstable. Russia is winning the war. And you may hate Putin, but he is still master of Russia. And eventually we're going to have to deal with him. These fantasies that we're going to be able to regime change him, I think, are absurd, and they've led us to this horrible point.
Okay, for the dictator, for the Sultan of Science, and focused Sacks with the slicked back hair. I am the world's greatest moderator. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
We'll let your winners ride.
Rain Man David Sacks.
And instead, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you, besties. Queen of Quinoa. Besties are back.
Code 13. That is my dog taking a notice in your driveway. Sacks.
Oh, man.
My haberdasher will meet me at Clinton.
We should all just get a room and just have one big huge orgy because they're all just useless. It's like this sexual tension that they just need to release somehow.
Wet your beak. Wet your beak.
Your beak.
That's gonna be we need to get merch.
Besties are
I'm
back.
going on.